Is it really? Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so folks, now we're officially taping. So I will pull up my PowerPoint, and the Middle Ages keep getting preempted by really important events. So I'll give first an update on where we ended the conversation last week, like the number of Republican senators needed for conviction. That's still an interesting question, and the Washington Post is keeping track, and these are the Republican senators have expressed openness. So this is 13 senators. And these are Republican senators who have not made a statement one way or the other, and that's 13. So, you know, that's a pool of 26. You might get to 17. Who knows? This is probably going to be the Economist cover today. And this is where the United States is, and we all feel glad that the cleanup man is here. But I wanted to put this in. I just watching the ceremonies yesterday and how stirring they were and how wonderful we pulled it off in spite of all the wild cards and Trump himself and the insurrection, that you pulled it off. And so I wanted to look at what this country finally overcame. And Juan Jose will be very familiar with this. We in answering the question of what civilization, we always start with, well, first there's warlords, and then you get some kind of order out of that, police order, if you will. But civilization is really what comes after that for managing power outside of the default of violence. And I think it's useful to just take a peek at animal behavior. Um, these are this is not representative anyway, but it's just a visual that I can't remember the exact statistics, but we're 99% overlap with Neanderthals and yeah, and maybe 97% with chimps. I'll have to double check that. But power management in among the chimpanzees and the gorillas, you get the alpha male, right? But you get beta males. So what happens with beta males? And what they're finding is that beta males form coalitions. And it's almost as if power always stimulates an opposite movement of jealous people who don't have power. And if you look around the world and how most political systems break about so close to 50-50 when you really get elections, that's interesting. Is that just, that can't be all a coincidence of 50% split on policy issues? Is there something more basic going on? And I think there may be, because we see in among chimpanzees that the beta males form coalitions, and they wait for the alpha male to show any sign of weakness. And I think Jane Goodall, when she first discovered this behavior, was almost shocked by it. But it seems to happen. And among humans, the default being violence. We're going back 13,000 years here with data accumulated by Steven Pinker. And I think really an interesting book. It certainly stimulated a lot of criticism and challenge and discussion. But his contention is, the book's called Our Better Angels, and his contention is, finally, when civilization is formed and states evolve, the level of violence drops way off. These are all archaeological sites, human skeletons that have been recovered and examined that show signs of violence. And the interesting thing, where we are in the Middle Ages, we're about ready to see, with the development of more sophisticated civilizations, namely the kings forming nation states, that the level of homicide in Western Europe is going to drop off. It's going to go back up with the world wars. Why is that? Well, we're going to see in the next period of history, when we go into the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, the quantitative production of thought, books. We're going to see during the Enlightenment the abolition of judicial torture. Even though Giuliani was calling for trial by combat. We see the abolition of slavery as an Enlightenment product. The New World is pretty late to the game, certainly our country in the Civil War, but Brazil's even later, and Cuba is even later than that. We're also going to see, and Juan Jose is going to appreciate this, the effect of expanded markets, industry being developed, that goes along with things. Abolition of the death penalty. And of course, we've seen a sudden increase of executions in the last month of the Trump. What's that? You know. Now, the political succession problem. And as I've gone through history this time, I've been looking at that, and it looked like finally, after thousands of years of warfare, finally, civilizations tumbled on inheritance. Hey, when the king dies, let's not all go to war. Let's let his son rule, and then we'll work things out. So you have pharaohs, emperors, and finally kings and monarchs, and it certainly worked for Egypt for 3,000 years, with certainly a lot of conflict and interludes, violent interludes. But this is civilization. This is some kind of agreement on what to do when the king dies, or the alpha male dies. And let's not have an alpha male. Let's just have some kind of arrangement where we know who's going to take power. So we're all familiar with how long that lasted. India is kind of a special case. I intentionally put in this crazy slide because India in power is managed very differently, often outside of politics. Outside of politics, power is managed by the caste system, and people born at different levels don't expect to have in their lifetime any more power than they were born with. And of course, there is a whole police level here to enforce things. And that's all I'm going to say about India. We'll come back to India at a later date for sure. to talk about the age of European expansion and colonialism. And then China, of course. China civilization and dynasties were kind of late um, uh, uh, in terms of really getting organized. Shang dynasty was limited. Zhao dynasties. Finally, you get the alpha male of all alpha males, um, who left us all the terracotta warriors. But he was only around for 15 years. He was succeeded by the first real long-lasting dynasty, the Han. And we'll spend some more time on China because of the relevance of China today and their political system. And I'll allude to them at the end. These are all and a lot of interludes. The mandate of heaven is often perceived to have been taken away. Heaven no longer supports this dynasty. And you have a lot of revolutions, many of them religious, Taoism in particular. And this is why China is so afraid of Falun Gong, as they're in the breed of the type of messianic movements that China has seen over and over again. But nevertheless, Confucianism does reassert itself through all these dynasties. Now, we talked earlier about consent, and the first time consent, which is the blue color in one of the domains of how power is managed, really making a sustained appearance in Rome. Sure, it was in Greece for 150 years, but it was very limited and it was very short-lived. So Rome was more enduring, but it didn't endure that long. It collapsed about 150 years before Christ, leading to the emperors, starting obviously with Julius Caesar, but going on and on with these made-up faces of long line of emperors. So we're here in the Middle Ages, and we're beginning to talk about the formation of kingdoms and monarchs as we move from the High Middle Ages. In the High Middle Ages, we've seen conflicts between powerful monarchs, mono being one warlord. So the first among equal warlords in France, the head of the Holy Roman Empire, and the church fighting with these guys. And of course, we see the church fighting with the Norman early Norman dynasties in England. And it's really England that makes the first giant step in monarchy. And this is from one of our favorite children's books on the history of England that we read to our kids. And you get all the dynasties. And this is the whole sweep of it. We talk about how those dynasties evolved into the Glorious Revolution, and the power was eventually taken away from these monarchs and given to Parliament, and that's where we're going. And it was taken away from the monarchs because it did not always work out. And Shakespeare is just full of the intrigue of political fights within the family over the succession of power. And this probably is the most famous, the murder of Richard III's nephews so that he could assume the throne, They were hidden in a tower and their bodies found. It wasn't all that long ago. So, but that's not the only problem with putting all of the power within a family. And we've seen in recent history the influence of Queen Victoria, who produced a daughter who married into the German royal family. And they had a son, William II, who was a terrible autocrat. He took the best of Bismarck and combined it with the worst instincts of German militarism. And you could lay, certainly when you're talking about World War I, you've got to talk about William the Second. Of course, the third cousin is Edward, who has George V, who was in power during World War I. But keep an eye on Alice. I want to show her a little bit more in just a second. So this is the whole family, but lurking inside this family, and when you get intermarriage between within one particular family that sends out rulers across Europe, you're going to get problems. And this is inbreeding, this is hemophilia, which was the wild card. So Queen Victoria was a carrier. So hemophilia resides on the X chromosome. Women get 2 bites at the apple, so they don't get the hemophilia. Men only get 1 bite at the apple. And if they draw the bad X, they're doomed. Queen Victoria passed it on to Alice, so she was a carrier. She passed it on to a daughter. This is Alexandra, as in Nicholas and Alexandra. She marries Nicholas, and she passes it on to a daughter who's just a carrier, but she passes it on to a son who gets hemophilia. And his disease and suffering consumes them to the point where they bring in the mad monk Rasputin. And so the other player in World War I, besides William II, is Nicholas II. And he is preoccupied and not doing a real good job. So there you are, Germany and Russia with arguably incompetent royal leaders. So this is the downside of the inheritance solution to managing power when the leader dies. And here at the very bottom, you see the marriage, Alexandra and Nicholas and their kids. And you just notice, oh, they all died the same year. Well, that's because they were all executed in a rural basement in remote Russia by the communists. So here we wind up the end of the road for monarchy. World War I, the people say, you know, maybe this monarchy's not so good. But we get World War II, and why do we get that? Because there's an emergency substitute for the monarchs, and these are alpha males. And now we're back to violence again. The solution to managing power has resorted to the default, and that didn't work out so well. Since World War II, we've seen the development of democracies taking off after World War II, finally, and autocracies dropping. Now, this goes up to 2018, and we've certainly seen some flattening of this and some regressions. But the point of this lecture is to just remind ourselves that what we saw yesterday was democracies, and the reassertion of consent, like we first saw with the Roman Senate, has seen a drop off in wars, a drop off from the deaths in wars. And all these are all Pinker's graphs. He's got a new book that deals with the Enlightenment. I can't remember what it is. So here's America's alpha male. This is the guy, and you read anything, and you know when he walks into the room, everything changes. He gave up power to Adams. And this was because now, since the Glorious Revolution, Parliament had a significant check on the executive, on the alpha male. Some of it may be Washington greatness and just saying, hey, this is the thing to do. He could have stayed on for another term, but he gave up power. And it was arguably easier to do because Adams and Washington were in the same party. So the real test comes 4 years later. But just sticking around to this moment, what was King George III thinking when he looked over and saw George Washington give up power? Well, Lin-Manuel Miranda tried to capture what George III might be thinking in Hamilton. And if you've seen it, this is a hilarious song that repeats 3 times. And the first time is when George Washington gives up power. And this is what Lin Miranda puts in George III's mouth. So I was thinking of playing it, but I thought that was going to be too over the top. Maybe next week if there's popular demand. But it's one of my favorite songs from Hamilton.
I vote yes.
Okay, I'll play it next time.
I vote yes, and I want them to take us back. Actually, I don't need to anymore. I did in Trump, the Trump years. I was willing to crawl back.
Okay. All right, good. So so Washington giving up power to Adams, they were buddy. But this guy, Thomas Jefferson, and Adams were not buddy. They were from different parties. And they had different points of view summarized here. And they envisioned a very a different world. Adams, Juan Jose, a more commercial-oriented world, business, industry. And Jefferson was an agrarian romantic who saw the farmers. And this is the split maybe we still see today in our country, rural versus urban, arguably. And so this is the election of 1800, and the sitting president, John Adams, loses. So this is the magic moment. this is the revolution of 1800. That's what Jefferson called it. This is a guy acknowledging he lost an election and giving up power. And it was in theory, that's what he was supposed to do, but would he do it? And he did do it, the peaceful transfer of power. Now, I'm sure the peaceful transfer of power has been done by the consent of the people elsewhere in history. And I'm not going to argue that America is the only place that this has ever happened. I'm sure it's happened other places. But as we sit here today, this is one of the lingering historical traditions that we're supposed to be setting for the world. Just as a side note, they died on the same day, which happened to be the 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It's so amazing, you almost wonder if it's true. So China almost figured it out. Jiang Zemin was the first one to give up all his official power. Deng Xiaoping had a lot of power, but it wasn't official. It was all unofficial. Very interesting. But Jiang Zemin had all the major titles, and he gave it up after 13 years. And Hu Jintao, then they said, well, you know what? Let's just give up power on a regular basis. We'll do it every 10 years. Okay, everybody agree? Yep, we all agree. That's what we'll put in the Constitution. However, Xi Jinping looked at 2022, said, that's too soon for me. I'm not done. And he engineered a change in the Constitution, lifting term limits for him. A terrible precedent. And this is what some Chinese observe as being the effect that he's going to turn into a Mao. And Mao unleashed the Cultural Revolution, which almost destroyed Chinese society and did destroy a large, significant part of it. So what's going to happen when with the transfer of power, finally, with Xi? They walked away from a very good solution, 10-year term limit. So we saw it yesterday. We didn't see it from the alpha male, but we saw it, the beta male acknowledging that there is a new alpha male. And he left, and that was the end of the Trump administration, and that is the end of my talk. So that we're right at 12. Obviously, we got a late start. This was never meant to occupy the whole hour. But without Juan Jose, I'm loath to go back to the Middle Ages. So I think I'll just throw it open to y'all to talk, ask questions.
I have a question, John. So the transfer of power between prime ministers in England, how would you classify that? Because that is definitely between the two alpha parties in England. And
well, but it, you know, it's consent. The Glorious Revolution said Parliament, and the Prime Minister is from one of the parties in parliament. So that's a very different model, but it's
Yeah.
still the people picking a party that then chooses the alpha male,
I see.
rather
Okay.
than choosing the alpha male directly.
I see. Yes, 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 that's true. Good point. Yeah, I think of it as the candidate winning the prime ministry, but you're right. It's the party vote.
Right, and if you watch this season of The Crown, Thatcher is a recurring player, and you see how she loses power and how that happens, and it's all within the Conservative Party and behind the scenes. It isn't as clean and crisp as the way we do it, but Ramsey talks about all the advantages and disadvantages between our system and the parliamentary system, and maybe there's hybrids like Germany that split the difference, but that's beyond the scope of my knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's interesting. Thank you.
This talk kind of brought to mind, there was a sociologist a number of years ago who talked about how violence is really going down if you go back in history. And that's something I always, when I'm really down and going, oh my God, things are getting so awful, they're getting worse, I have to kind of remember that. And so your slideshow kind of reminded me of that, you know, violence to women, to children, to, you know, has gone down.
Oh yeah, I was very selective at what I put up. Steven Pinker, if you want to get his book, Our Better Angels, he's got all the graphs, and it's got all the things that you mentioned. Okay, folks. I'll stop recording, and we'll just become more informal, unless anybody has a last minute thing. All right. So now we'll just chat.